Hi there. Welcome to the Border Crossings interview. My name is Murad Kurbaj. I'm going to be leading this interview with Björn Dahlman, and we'll be discussing his work involved with border crossings over the years. I'm just going to describe myself before we start the interview. I come from a mixed heritage background of Syrian and Argentinian. I'm currently based in Glasgow, Scotland. I have short dark hair, pale skin, and a dark jumper on. I'd like Björn to describe himself just now.
Yeah. Well, hi, my name is Björn Dahlman. I'm an actor and theater director from Sweden. And the way I look, both my parents are of Swedish origin. I'm from Sweden. You can tell from my name and my accent, I guess. So, pale skin, dark blonde hair. I'm wearing a navy blue shirt, and I haven't shaved for a week or so. So, a little bit of a beard.
Nice. Thank you so much, Björn. So we'll be speaking about your involvement with border crossings over the years. I know you were involved in a project called Orientations. Would you mind just describing to the audience like a little bit about the project in your own words?
Yeah, sure. So I was in a play called Reorientations that was part three of a trilogy. So it was a huge project that had been going on for several years. And it dealt with topics such as identity, both national identity and also sexual identity. So there was a word game going on there with orientations, referring both to sexual orientations, but also to like the Orient, that part of the world. So there were actors from England or Great Britain, I should say, United Kingdom, and from India, and from China, Sweden, and also choreographers from France. And so the first play, Orientations, I mean, there were characters who were in all three parts of this trilogy. So when I was when I started working with reorientations, it was quite overwhelming because the project itself had so much history and a lot of the characters had so much background. For me, I was so the third part, reorientations. That was the first time there were Swedish actors involved. I know the director Michael Walling wanted to to connect to this tradition of Swedish and also Norwegian, like Nordic and naturalism, the tradition of Strindberg, August Strindberg, and everything. So I was actually in the play. I was doing Yuan, which was a Swedish actor who went to Shanghai, where he actually spent his childhood, to do a version of Miss Julie, the famous play by August Strindberg. And my Swedish co-actress Mia Källqvist, she we were both actors in that Miss Julie, and the story of my character was that just like in the middle of everything, in the middle of a show, I just walk out of the theater. I'm facing the audience saying, I've had enough of this. I don't want to be an actor anymore, and I just walk out. So everything in this play was about finding yourself, figuring out who you are. And I think what was so interesting, so the whole play, it was set in Shanghai, where we also performed. And this was back in 2010. Back then, Shanghai was the New York of Asia. Like, that's where people go to fulfill their dreams, to prove that if I can make it in Shanghai, I can make it everywhere. That the city really had that vibe back then. I didn't realize by the time we were performing, I fell in love with Shanghai and I like moved there. And only then I realized that, whoa, this is really the city in the world right now where people actually go to find themselves. So I really think that Michael Wallen hit, like, what do you call it?
Nail on the
Hit
head.
the yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, that was the project basically, and it was a devised piece. Actually, I was not part of the devising process. I replaced another Swedish actor. Um, so I just got a script in hand, and we had a couple of weeks of rehearsals in London, and we went to Shanghai to open it.
Had you been to Shanghai before doing the project?
Nope.
Right.
I had been to Beijing back in 1999
Mhm.
when I was 16 years old, and I mean, it was another world. It was another China. There were no cars. People were taking the bike, and then you come to Shanghai, which is like, hello and welcome to the future.
And you started learning like Mandarin while you were there. Is that right?
I was taking Mandarin courses back in high school. That's also why I went to Beijing in '99. But then when I got the part, when I knew I was going back to China, I found my old books. I started studying again, and we also made some adaptations to the script, so it became part of my story that my character actually spoke a bit of Chinese. And they gave me a long. This is a funny story. They gave me a long speech. I had a long speech. I was accepting some kind of award for international. My character, like, oh, supporting intercultural communications, yada yada. And they say, oh, by the way, when we're in China, we want you to do this speech in Chinese. Actually, we did have a run at the Soho Theatre in London before we went to China. We didn't open it in China. And just a couple of days before we got on the plane, they said, "Oh, we want you to do the speech in Chinese." And I say, "Fine, but you gotta give me the speech in pinyin, which is a system for writing all the words in Western characters, because I couldn't read
Mm-hmm.
the Chinese characters." And they didn't. The the translator slash assistant director, she just gave me the speech. She gave it to me on a paper. It was all in Chinese characters, and she said, "See you in Shanghai in 2 days." So I couldn't study. I had one day to learn this like 4 minute speech in Chinese. I did not sleep well. That was quite amazing.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I can imagine that must have been a very intense experience. Um,
Lots of
the idea of it being like a kind of touching on national and sexual identity, was that something that was like that drew you to part of the project?
My very honest answer would be no. I really, really, really wanted to be in it because of this international thing, this international vibe, and chance of going back to Shanghai and also to London. Uh, and I had never been to London at that time. Um, it was really like only a few months earlier I started working with an Indian actor in another project that was also a devising project. So this whole devising thing was also a big thing for me. But I found the topic of the play very, very interesting. And to be honest, I didn't understand back then how interlinked national identity and sexual identity can be. To me, that was like, I didn't get it, but now I understand, like, whoa, this is actually a really, like, it's a really important, but also a really disturbing insight that there's something going on there. But at the time, no, but in the aftermath, I'm very happy that I got to work with this topic.
I'd love to hear like what that connection would be, or what you found out, or what you realized whilst doing the project.
Mhm. Well, so I know, I mean, the place, orientation, disorientation, and reorientation, this whole trilogy, it really like digs deep into this topic. And to be very honest, since I had I was thrown into the project, I wasn't part of the devising process. So I have to admit, I'm not fully aware of all the discussions that were had, the journey that all the other characters went through. So I'm sure, and also, I mean, obviously, I haven't seen the show. I was backstage trying to watch as much as I could. But there are so many angles and takes on this topic that I'm not 100% aware of. But what I'm thinking today, and I mean, 16 years have passed, um, I'm at another place now compared to where I was. But I'm thinking that, how to say, in war, there's always this this aspect of we're conquering the opponent's lands, but we're also like conquering their women. There is this. I mean, you can go back and read old Greek plays here, the Troyes,
Hmm.
Troyes. I don't know the English title. I mean, it's always there. There's a very disturbing parallel between conquering a country, conquering the women of a country.
Hmm.
So I'm also thinking along the line that how you identify as a sexual being, there is also this, or might be, I would say, there is also this idea of what is a Swedish man, what is a Swedish woman. If you have all these nationalist ideas, if you so here, personally, being Swedish is not a big thing in my identity at all. I'm playing around with it a lot because I live in Shanghai, and of course I'm different because I'm Swedish. But
Hmm.
I never identified as a Swedish person. That's just I happen to be born there. But I think if you identify as a Swedish person, it also becomes important for me maybe to be a Swedish man
Hmm.
and to have my Swedish woman. And those I think these two can merge into each other in a very like dark cluster of very nationalistic, maybe very imperialistic ideas. I don't think this is healthy at all. So that's why I'm saying that it's a very interesting and disturbing topic. Now, when it comes, of course, to discovering your sexual identity, your orientation, that itself is not a dark thing. That's not at all what I'm saying,
Hmm.
obviously. But I just thought, looking back at it, I thought it was a very, very brave area to really dig into.
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. It's really interesting the word play as well that I guess
Mm,
gets revealed once you see the play and once you realize the themes that are discussed. Um,
yeah.
you mentioned you
And
worked.
there's also
Sorry.
this. I mean, when you're talking about the Far East, the Orient, there's also. I mean, in China, we always joke about white men who go there. Oh, all these Asian women. We say it's the yellow fever.
Hmm.
There's also some very disturbing exotism going on there that I think it's a good thing to depict it and see, hey, what's going on here?
Would you say it kind of satirizes these kind of the
I I didn't feel the genre wasn't satire in that sense, but I think the no, I wouldn't say because the way we dug into the problems that occur, the inequality that can occur in, for example, a love relation. I think we dug into that with a very like satire can be a very serious thing, but a very like a very serious approach. So I wouldn't call it satire, even though there were, of course, elements of satire there. Because you're pointing certain things out.
hmm hmm It was just this idea that it was just a thought that came into my head as you were describing
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. It's also, I mean, it's been 16 years. I'm
Yeah.
also trying to remember like, what did we do?
How
I
long
mean,
were
I
you
felt.
performing there for? Sorry.
Say again.
How long were you performing there for?
Let's see. I think we did 2 weeks at the Soho Theatre, and then 2 weeks in Shanghai, and then also traveling around Sweden for a couple of weeks. But honestly, I can't swear that I remember the time frame
Hmm.
correctly. Like especially because London was all new. It felt like I was there for half a year when
Hmm.
it was maybe 4 to 6 weeks. And same thing with Shanghai. It can't have been more than 3 weeks,
Okay.
but it completely changed my life. I mean, I'm still. My apartment is just across the street from the theater. I walk by the theater almost every day now when I'm there, so it felt like it was forever.
Hmm. That's so nice. Um, yeah, you mentioned that it's like something that, in your own words, has changed your life. Um, would you mind like expanding on the impact it's had since the project has finished?
Sure. I mean, two big things happened to me. The first thing was artistically. Like, I was already interested in working internationally and devising, and
Hmm.
this project made me realize like the connection there. To me, international work is a lot about finding different perspectives, uh, using different form, because I think every form of theater or performance art, performing art, uh, it has a how to say a meta story. Like the naturalistic theater emerged from the idea that we can understand the human psyche from creating like experiments. I mean, that is a view upon what it is to be a human being, and that emerges like from that emerges a certain form of theater. And I think depicting all these stories that are hidden in the forms, I find that extremely interesting. And I find these like international devising projects, I think that's the best way to do it. And also, I mean, we back in 2010, we still had high hopes for a globalized world. I still do, even though it's kind of dipping right now.
Hmm.
So I really think these kind of projects are the forms for the future. And after reorientations, I went to India to work with Spatika Ramanujan, who was another actress in reorientations. You should talk to her, by the way, because yeah, she played a huge part in that. We created a play called Color Correction about women's situation in India after the Delhi gang raid, plus the Western media image of women's situation in India, and the juxtaposition between these two became the ground for a very satirical comedy, which this whole thing of like putting these two things together. I think that whole concept came from the work with the orientation. I also did projects with South African actors about prostitution in Sweden and South Africa. And so artistically, it gave me a huge boost as a director rather than an actor. But then also, I loved China since I was a kid. I grew up with a dream of going to China to learn Kung Fu. And when I went to Beijing, it was like I wanted to find old China. I was interested in Chinese history and Chinese culture and all that. When I came to Shanghai, I realized it has old China, but it's also a super international city. Um, I mean, it's the future. I love the architecture, the skyscrapers, and everything. So I found this one amazing city that had both. And I just felt, I remember next to the theater was a small shopping mall. No, sorry, a grocery store. And I used to, just drop in there and buy some eggs or whatever. And I used to think, what if this could be the grocery store I go to buy my breakfast? 4 years later, I moved to Shanghai. I signed up at the Theatre Academy. I didn't know it was the same block. So I went to buy breakfast, and all of a sudden, I found the same grocery store. I was like, this is unreal. And well, nowadays, I live in Shanghai.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Yeah, I love these small connections.
Yeah, and every time I go there and I walk by the theater, I always send a message to Michael Walling saying, I'm here. I've been in contact with a lot of these people who were in the play.
That's so beautiful that it's kind of something that went beyond just the few weeks that you were there, but it continues to have an impact on you just now.
I remember when I said goodbye to Michael after the project, he said, I'm sure the legacy of this project will live on in unexpected ways. And I thought he was so pretentious saying that, but oh my God, was he right?
That's so beautiful to hear that it had this impact.
He
And
knew what he was doing. I think he really did.
yeah, yeah, definitely. You mentioned you were working with like Indian performers, right, and Chinese performers. How was that experience for you?
It was great. I wish I had had more scenes together with them, but just rehearsing with them. So Michael was very generous, even though I only had a few days to learn my part and everything. He still let us do a little bit of devising work together. So I still got to do a few improvisations with the Chinese and the Indian actors and the British actors. You think we're so close, right? Swedish and British theatre culture should be the same, but it's not. It's very, very, very different, which was interesting. But I did get to work with them at least a little, and it was fascinating. I think my strongest memory, one of the actors, the Chinese actor, she was an older lady, very high status. She filmed with Ang Lee, so she was like up here. Song Hui was her name. And I remember, so I come from a world where you don't plan your movements. You just, imagine everything and then come what may within the frame of what the director tells you. So this whole thing of planning a gesture and planning when you turn your head, to me that was a no-no.
Hmm.
I had a scene with this Song Hui. We were in the background doing like a pantomime, while the lead actress of that particular scene were in the front. So we just had this little choreography, and I started to realize that she did exactly the same movements every time. I was a little bit like, improvising, but she was like, every little thing, she had this gesture, every little finger, exactly the same thing. So I started studying her, and all of a sudden I realized she twinkled her eyes at the same spot in every single show. I was like, this is unreal. And she was electric. Like I have never been on stage with anyone who had that intense presence. And I was like, okay, so when they studied theater in China, even though they become what do you say, modern actor or in China they Kwaji, uh, speaking actors, dramatic actors.
Mm.
Still, they study Beijing opera, which has all these fixed gestures, and it just hit me how that extreme control led to this presence. So that was really really fascinating to me.
Do you think that way of working has like influenced you since then? Do you think elements of that precision?
Yeah, I think as a director, absolutely. Like even if I don't pick up their toolbox, just seeing that toolbox and understanding what other actors do helps me a lot. So it for me, having this kind of like control everything, it's just not for me as an actor. But just knowing that toolbox is there, you can control a few things when you need this like elevated kind of presence. And yeah, I mean, you learn something from every co-actor, absolutely. And to meet someone who has walked such a long way in one tradition, of course she will reach a very high level of whatever she's doing. So yeah, I was happy to be able to, not pick the lowest hanging fruit, but actually pick the fancy ones up there.
How many people were involved in the production?
All of them. There were a lot. We
Oh,
were
okay. It's a
really
big crew, big
very,
crew.
I can do this. I can do this. We were at least, I think, 9 or 10 actors. And then we had a director, an assistant director, and there were dramaturgs and choreographers and stage designers. So I would say at least 15, 16 people, but probably more.
Okay. And I was doing a little bit of research before about like the project.
Yeah, you probably know this better than
No, no, just I
this.
was yeah, I was just looking a little bit about how like it was a project that was like started and it was like trying to involve these different cultures involving um like parts of like Europe as well as like China and India. And
Mm,
I assume there'll be this mixture of languages as well during the rehearsals, and it sounds like
mm,
during the play you mentioned you were speaking in Chinese. Um,
yeah.
was that like had you done much productions of like a similar scale or a similar um, yeah like a similar with the similarities, or was it the first time you'd done something like this?
It was, I mean, the very first time I did an international project on this level, for sure. And using all these differences, like the cultural differences and language differences, not as an obstacle that we needed to deal with, but actually as a tool, as the soil we were digging in. Yeah, for sure. I did work a little bit with this Indian actor I mentioned, his name is Kilu, where we kind of played along a little bit with him, doing some scenes in Hindi because we didn't want the Swedish audience to. In theater you always try to you play with distance and closeness, right? Sometimes you want to create a distance for the audience to fill in the gaps themselves, and sometimes you want to be here. Um, but that was more like a directorial method for achieving a certain effect, to actually dig around in these differences, cultural differences, to create material. That was all me at that
Hmm. Hmm. Because I can imagine for like for yourself, it was like um, stepping into like this new city, this new environment, and adapting to that. And again, also for them to adapt to your style of working and
time.
your
Yeah.
approach. You know.
Oh, oh yes, oh yes, yeah. Oh, I know. I remember. So I come when I started studying theater. There was a lot of improv going on, and I remember this one time where I played around a little bit too far outside of the frames that the director had given me, and I remember one of my co-actors got quite upset with me, and I could admit that, yeah, well, I was very young at the time. That wasn't a very smart thing to do, but I remember being very surprised by how big a deal this was for that for
Hmm.
my character. I was the one who was wrong, but it was, I think it was a bit of a cultural shock going on there.
Hmm.
Like, you cannot play around like this.
Inevitably, that's part of the. I can imagine it's part of the process of working on something like this, where you're kind of having to adapt to each other's ways of working, and that's what really. It sounds like it's part of the fun and a part of the enjoyment of doing something like
I
this.
totally think so. I
Um,
totally think so.
yeah, you mentioned just going back to something you mentioned earlier. You mentioned that you China was somewhere as a child that like had this big impact on you, even having like before you'd gone there, it had like it was somewhere you'd love. Did it like live up to that expectation? Did it exceed it? Did it yeah, like how was that going from somewhere idolizing somewhere and then finally going to live there and work there?
I think that, I mean, we were, during the project, the time frame was so short, and also, I mean, we had the work to focus on, and I think during those 3 weeks, I was just excited, like, whoa, I'm in Shanghai, what's going on here? Later on, when I moved to Shanghai, I experienced the same thing that many of my friends have experienced. Like, of course, I met quite a few people who had my story, like, oh, I love Buddhism, I love Taoism, I want to move to China and
Hmm.
study calligraphy and acupuncture, whatever. And they and the same for me, like we all got so disappointed. And I think that's a lesson to learn. I mean, creating this romantic idea of something, there's some kind of exotism in there.
Hmm.
I mean, it's not, yeah, it's not, what do you say? It's not a chill thing. It's not a nice thing to do, actually, to create this. Like, oh, but you're Chinese, you're so wise, So yeah, I had that. that journey for sure.
Hmm.
There are still things in the Chinese culture that I absolutely love, and that I actually, for some reason, it just makes me feel at home, and I miss it a lot when I'm in Sweden. But yeah, it's that process has been going on for sure.
Because at the start of the interview, you mentioned that Shanghai, at the point that you were doing the play, it was the New York. It was described as this like this place where if you make it in Shanghai, you can make it anywhere. Does that mean
It
that?
was
Yeah, does that mean that now it's not like that?
yeah. So people who have been there for a long time, they say that Shanghai between, I think they usually mention like 2006 and 2014, that era, Shanghai was for Asia what Berlin was for Europe in the 1920s. So it was really like the golden era. And I got to experience the last. I moved there in 2014, so I got to see the last of that era, and I got to see it all fall apart. It was really a cultural melting spot. There were like legendary restaurants and jazz clubs that have been around since the 50s. It was beautiful. It really was, and it was yeah. And the political climate really changed, and then the pandemic happened, and when I came back in 2023, it just wasn't the same city. Really sad. I still love it. It still has a lot, but no, it's very very good. But I'm very happy that I had a chance to be there like, during that magic time. Now it's Bangkok. Everyone who came to Shanghai from the West, when I went there, they now moved to Bangkok to do business. And I'm like, do I need to move to Bangkok now? I don't want to do
Okay, wow, all over.
that. It's literally everywhere. Yeah. People used to be so proud of being in Shanghai. Like it was this vibe. I made it to Shanghai. I'm here now, and everybody's coming here. And now people are just talking about when they're gonna be away.
Wow. Did it feel like quite a drastic shift then?
Yeah, everybody's talking about it. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's not Shanghai anymore." When you
Mm.
say Shanghai, the magical, mysterious dream, it's just not Shanghai anymore. It's like when you say New York, you still refer to what New York was in the 80s, right? But it's not like that.
Mhm. Mhm. Um. Do you still live there, or are you no longer living there then?
I'm based there. I still have my apartment back in Sweden. I still run my theater company back in Sweden. So yeah, I live in Sweden and Shanghai. But
Okay.
I have my work visa in Shanghai. I have projects going on. I have a contract with the theater. So yeah, I'm there.
It's nice that at least a part of you, or you're still having that, you've still got that connection to this city that has had an impact on you, and that also, like, yeah, like for the city not to feel like it's losing all of its great
I
artistic
think
elements.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's still one of the biggest financial centers in the world, and things will change. I think Shanghai will see more golden eras in the future.
Hmm. So, a little bit back to the reorientations project and
Yeah,
your involvement there. Um, do you think like this, being that it's set in Shanghai, do you think that had an impact on the project? Do you think it would have felt like it would have been a different project had it been set somewhere else?
oh, totally,
Yeah.
totally. I felt that. I mean, I don't know where Shanghai became part of the project. I'm sure Michael would have wanted to make like the part three of the trilogy anyway. But just this idea of building the play around a city that itself is a magnet, and because that was the play, all these
Hmm.
characters for some reason they end up in Shanghai. And again, at that time, Shanghai was a city where you end up in Shanghai. All the paths lead to Shanghai. All the roads go to Shanghai. So it made perfect sense that, yeah, it had to be Shanghai for
Mhm.
that script to happen.
Um, did you manage to have much of a to get a sense of what the audience's reactions was to the performance and to the project?
I felt that, I mean, it was very different performing in England, Sweden, and Shanghai. And I felt that it was a very prestigious project for the Chinese and for that theater. So we had a full house every night. And we weren't sure who were there. It felt like, the theater needed to fill up the space. So we think that they had some, like, groups who were more or less like, okay, at this time you will watch this play, period. So we don't really know. And it was also like, sometimes you perform on a Friday night, you have an audience who love it and they laugh at everything. And sometimes you have an audience that is quiet the whole night. And then now the performance is done and everybody stand up and clap. And, in China, when they think it's really good, they don't clap, they scream. Nobody told us. So there was this one show. All of a sudden, the whole audience goes, "Oh, oh, oh! What the hell is going on?" So yeah, it was hard to read the audience actually in China.
I heard, well, Michael mentioned that you after you did your speech in Chinese that you
Yeah,
received a standing ovation. Is that correct?
if he says, I don't remember. I should remember this, but I think I was probably too deep in my adrenaline rush. But it was
Okay.
at that time. It was still a thing. When a foreigner goes on stage and speaks Chinese, it was still a big thing back then. So I'm not surprised if that happened. I
Yeah.
honestly don't remember.
Okay. Maybe it was just like a very positive reaction. I guess maybe people were really.
It it was, and I remember people coming up to the street and all that. It's like, oh, I saw you in this play, and I was at Arlanda Airport in Stockholm a couple of years after this, and a Chinese guy came up to me in the airport in Sweden. Was like, I saw you in that play, and I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
That's all I need. That's all the recognition I need in my life.
Wow. That must be. It must have felt amazing. Yeah. Even 2 years later.
I felt like the king of the world at that moment.
Yeah, that's so nice. Well, then it shows that there was a positive reaction, I guess, from the audience.
Totally, yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it was, and also like, because I still meet those Chinese actors now and then, and they're like, "Oh, this play," and like you can tell from the way they talk about it that it was a big thing.
Um, and so since 2010, what have, like you mentioned, you did some involved in some projects in India, um, and yeah, what have you been up to since the project happened?
I've I've done a lot. So I was. This was in 2010. I started my theater company in Sweden in 2009, and I had some, yeah, 6, 8 years where I worked like a maniac. Actually, I heard Michael Walling talking to someone saying about me, this guy's a machine. I could open 5 to 10 new plays per year. I worked 80 hours per week, always.
Wow.
So I did a lot. I was doing my theater company, and I did have this international devising profile, and at the same time I was doing a lot of theater with young audiences. That's actually, I mean, Sweden has a very rich tradition of theater for children. That's actually how I managed to get a job in Shanghai later on, because theater for children became a huge thing in Shanghai. Uh, and they didn't have their own tradition. So all of a sudden, there's a Swedish theater director in town who does children theater that everybody wants. So in 2014 and then after the pandemic, I got a lot of directing jobs in Shanghai. Parallel to that, I started doing clowning, red nose clowning. I started doing charity projects with Clowns Without Borders. So I actually merged that. So now in Shanghai, I'm the clown performing for children of migrant workers. and teaching clowning. So it's and also I started doing stand up in Shanghai, and I now have like I'm now in the starting point of a professional career as a stand up comedian. So it's been a lot going on at the same time, and one day you wake up and you realize you're 40 and you don't have the same energy anymore, and that's what I like. So yeah, but yeah, a lot has been going.
Have you done anything in different languages?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot in Chinese these days. I teach clowning in Chinese only.
Wow.
And also for a few years, I did stand up comedy in Chinese. I stopped doing that because stand up comedy is developing a lot in China. And all of a sudden, the audience want like really well written material. When I started, it was enough to be a foreigner trying to say some things in Chinese on stage, and it was funny. But now the audience require much higher quality writing than I'm capable of in Chinese. But yeah, and of course, I mean, I'm working in English all the time, which is not my first language. So that's already a mess.
How does humor compare in Sweden to like Chinese humor?
So I think that I mean, if you talk about clown, it's all the same. Everybody's asking what's the difference, and I'm like, well, everywhere you go in the world, people will laugh when you tell them that. But when it comes to stand-up comedy, um, when we so I was at a comedy club called Kung Fu Comedy, and it was probably the first club in Shanghai that actually wanted a mixed audience and also wanted Chinese comedians and started doing open mics in Chinese and English. So what happened was that a lot of Chinese people who wanted to do stand-up comedy came to us, and it was really beautiful. But then you can tell that this, I mean, stand-up comedy style. You usually say that you want 5 laughs per minute and it should be fast, and you rarely go into storytelling. It's more like you tell a joke, you have a couple of tags, you get 4 or 5 laughters, you move on to the next joke. Whereas the Chinese want to do, they can do a 5 minute story, and at the end of the story, they get one big laugh, and that's when they get a standing ovation. So the style was very different. Nowadays, the Chinese are picking up if you can say the Western style or the American style.
Mm-hmm.
But that was very, very different. And the Chinese also, they love to over exaggerate and make their stories like not believable at all, just absurd in a way that many Western stand-up comedians, like, they don't go there. It's not considered stand-up comedy. So style was very different. But now we're learning from each other.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing that comes to. But also, what's funny about it, when I started doing stand-up comedy in Chinese, what would happen is that the Chinese comedians who wanted to do it in English, they would come to an open mic, they would record it, and then they would go home and learn everything by heart. And the next week, they would come back and do exactly the same 5 minute set as some other comedian did
Wow.
the previous week. And of course, we would be like, you can't do it, but that's the way you do it. And I wrote jokes in Chinese, and they would say to me like, "Oh, your jokes are funny, but you can't do that because nobody knows these jokes. I'll tell you a joke that everybody knows. It's very famous. You can do that one instead." So this whole concept of you're an artist, you have your unique qualities, just not there.
Wow.
But now it's now it's what we would call normal.
Did you feel like that was something you had to adapt to, that took you a while to adapt?
No, no one adapted. We were like, no, this is not how we do it. We do it our way. And
Mm-hmm.
but this was back 2016, so it was 10 years ago.
You mentioned that you weren't involved in the devising of the play because you stepped in
Yeah,
for like another Swedish actor. How did that
yeah.
feel to step in a little bit blind, would you say?
I remember struggling a lot. Um, Also, I mean, this I was young and quite unexperienced, and now I've been doing that. I've been stepping in for people. People have been stepping in for me. I've been directing plays, and now I know that this is not a big thing. It happens all the time. But back then, especially since it was so much like the device pick from yourself, the other actor, since Mikael Dahl, great actor, he worked a lot with this sexual identity theme in a way that I didn't. So yeah, I really struggled to make it my own. I had great help also because I spoke Chinese, so we kind of rewrote the background story of the character quite a lot, so that helped me. But yeah, I struggled.
Mm. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can see. Like, it must be a difficult thing to step into, without much background or without the role really being made for you. It's almost being made for somebody else. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a strange thing. It's part of the craft. Also, as an actor, you learn to do that. I was young and inexperienced. This was before I attended the theater academy, also. So yeah, I I don't think it would have been that big a problem today.
hmm hmm We're like approaching near the end of the interview. I think it's been really nice to hear how much the project had an impact beyond just the time and the idea of like, the city and the place playing such an impact on, the ideas that were discussed in the play, um, and just yeah, just like kind of maybe one like like a like a final question about these national and sexual identities that are touched on, and how, um, do you think if the play had been made today, it would be touching on something slightly different, or do you think it would be kind of still be?
Well, I believe that. So first of all, I feel so happy and privileged to have had the opportunity to be a part of this because I don't think these projects happen anymore. I mean, practically, this was funded by European Union money, and this was before Brexit.
Hmm
So that's just one thing. And also, I think that back then, people had hope. Globalization was associated with hope. Nowadays, what's going on in the world is weird politics that's just. I don't think people understand what a huge impact this protectionism, this, I would say, toxic nationalism has on the whole world. Like, the problem is not only that you chop down all everything that grows, you poison the soil so you can't plant new seeds. Like this whole reorientation, this whole project, it was planting so many beautiful seeds and so many good things came from it. Now the soil is poisoned. So yeah, I just it was another time, and I was really happy to be around at that time. And we need to work. It's gonna be baby steps. It's gonna take a lot of time, but we need to go there again because the opportunities to build something good for the future. Um, you don't know what you got till it's gone, right? Because, and I completely forgot your question. I'm so sorry. It was related to
Yes,
this,
it
right?
was. It was more about if the play had been made now, do you think
Oh
it
yeah,
would be a
thank you.
similar? Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I think that there were things that we discussed in that play. Uh, Homosexuality, HLB, help me, I know this in English. LBTQ.
LGBTQ plus, yes.
Thank you.
No
I can
worries.
say it in Swedish. Thank you so much. There were things that we discussed back then, even in China, uh, that we were allowed to discuss, that today would be considered provoking or whatever, um, which is sad and scary and all that. I mean, brave projects are still happening, but I think I would say the discourse is quite different today.
Mhm.
And also, back then, I mean, we came to a China where I remember there were some of the Chinese people that we worked with that took me aside. Many people they didn't have any uh, contact with foreigners like that. And they would take me aside and it's so many Chinese people are still angry with Japan for what happened during World War II. And of course, horrible things happen. But to me, as a Swede, I mean, we weren't even involved in the world wars. Holding grudges from previous wars, it's just so unknown for me. I'm not judging anyone for doing it, but it was so like, it was a kind of nationalism that I have never been approached with. But back then, that was an exception, and I feel today this is something that being few and it's around in another way. So I think this whole idea of like talking about finding your roots and your origins, and yeah, the discourse is very different.
That's a very like powerful message to end on. This idea that the world has changed significantly in the last 15, 16 years. Not just Shanghai.
We didn't see it coming.
Hmm.
That's how I remember it. We didn't see it coming. Like I remember when we were in China, a Chinese activist, I guess you can call it, received the Nobel Peace Prize. Within 3 seconds, all the televisions in the whole country were dead. I had my computer plugged in the hotel room when it happened. It didn't work. They used the hotel wire to put something in my computer, and I told the front desk, and they were like, "Oh, we know what happened. We have a guy. We'll fix it." No, so it was like this way, this censorship, this way of banning information. We thought it was extreme and absurd, and the attitude was like, "Whoa, this is still happening. Well, we're moving towards a bright future." And then, not even 4 years later, 6 years later, everything was like, boom. And looking back, I feel we were so naive. We lived in our bubble where, and also Shanghai was like that. Everyone was so optimistic. Everyone had money to invest. New clubs, new restaurants were opening all the time, and people were like, yeah,
Hmm.
everybody was optimistic for the future. And then it just went so fast. And then it was a completely different world.
This kind of phrase that you used of the soil being poisoned. Do you think that's something that can change in the future, or do you think this is?
Now, so here's the thing I truly believe in healing as a concept.
Hmm.
I believe people can heal. I believe nations can heal. I believe culture can heal. I believe Mother Earth, nature can heal. I mean, my journeys with Cancer Without Borders I have witnessed kids who had the most traumatic experience, like you can't even imagine. Just from laughing, just from being happy, achieving the most amazing things. But we need to want to heal. And I believe that we need to, I don't know the English word, but we cannot lose contact with ourselves. Because when we're in contact with ourselves, we can, this is going to sound so cliche, I wish my English was better, but
No.
we can, we can tell right from wrong. It doesn't matter what religion you believe in or what politics you believe in. If your God tells you violence is a good thing, that's not a God you should
Hmm.
listen to. If your ideology says we should kill our opponents, that's the wrong ideology, no matter what else is there in that system of belief. And we know that. But when we are seduced, because that's what it's all about, when we're seduced by leaders or politicians or religious figures or people who want to sell us stuff, whatever, when we're seduced by these people also place fear and judgment and other kind of violence into our heads. We're walking in the wrong direction.
Hmm.
And we need to be in contact with ourselves so much that we feel something is wrong. And when we do that, yes, we can create a good soil again. But there's so much in the world. I think that's why culture, theater, everything that connects us with ourselves and makes us feel something, that's why it's so important. Because today there are so many distractions. And I'm not it's social media, consumerism, all those things. That it's so cliche to point it out, but it's true. So to your question, yeah, I'm 100% sure it can create a good soul, and it's happening every day, all around us if we just open our eyes. But we need to understand that we need to choose what way to walk.